We talked about not the legislature and not 2+2 articulation agreements. We talked about our programs. We talked about our curriculum. We talked about our students. We talked about our faculty. We talked about our visiting artist programs. Hey, I heard you have Wendy White coming tonight. This is God's honest truth. Yeah, we are. Isn't that awesome? Yeah, she does Rob Nudo, right? Yeah. I think they have worked together. And Jared, we had Jared Sprecher in our visiting artist program. He was fabulous. And those are the kinds of conversations, I think, that are resonant, that mean something to me anyway, as a teacher, as the head of this department. Those are the things, I think, our faculty, our students, tonight, our visiting artist programs that make us a little bit extraordinary, and I'm really proud of that. I'm proud to have Wendy here. I'm proud that the Cress Gallery is the home of this visiting artist lecture series. I'm proud of my friendship with Diane Marek, and I'm proud to have known Diane, for whom this series is named and continues in her memory. So there's a lot to be grateful for, and I do have these moments where I wonder what the hell I've gotten myself into as an administrator. And then I have these other kind of like parallel moments where I'm reminded how extraordinary it is to be engaged in something as rich and beautiful as something like this. Ruth made me promise not to do anything on her behalf other than to say thank you for her advocacy of the gallery. And she also told me that for this show especially, she has had extraordinary help and support for everything that's happened, both from her staff and from her colleagues in the faculty, from friends in the community who have partnered and shared in building this series over the years. And so I'll honor that request and not say any more than that, but I will say thank you, Ruth, for your advocacy of the gallery. Thank you all for being here. It means a lot to see you, and I hope you enjoy the lecture. I hope certainly that you enjoy the exhibition. It's extraordinary. And without further ado, I will introduce Ruth Grover, who is the director and curator of the department's Cress Gallery of Art and Collections, and she will go into much more detail introducing Wendy for this evening's lecture.
After tonight's lecture, she'll be spending a great deal of time here in this building with a professionalism panel on Wednesday afternoon from 1:40 to, no, it's Thursday afternoon from 1:40 to 2:50. Process and materials talks, she'll give 2 identical sessions, although I'm sure the questions will make them from students and others who are in attendance will make them vastly different. And those sessions will be from 11 to 12 a.m. tomorrow and Wednesday, or tomorrow and Thursday. In between that, she's going to be doing studio visits with our students, all of our majors, upper level majors, and I can say she has a very full schedule. So, and the terrific thing is that she's really looking forward to it, and I think that's the mark of Marek Visiting Artist. And once again, thanks to everyone who's helped and pitched in and helped rally enthusiasm in the community and within the department, so that so many of you could be here tonight and so many of you are here sitting with us tonight. Not least of all, to thank Wendy White, who has just been a joy to work with over the past few months, and of course Leo Koning Gallery in New York City, whose courtesy the work appears in the gallery for this exhibition. And of course the exhibition is Wendy White's 6 Years, 6 Works, and it's not because she only completed 6 works during that time. If you look at the website, you'll see a really large body of work over many years. And the exhibition dates are October 11th until December the 2nd this fall. And as an introduction, I'm just going to briefly say that Wendy received a BFA from Savannah College of Art and Design in Savannah, Georgia, in fibers, and an MFA in painting from the Mason Groves School of the Arts at Rutgers, New Jersey. She currently serves on the faculty at Mason Groves School of the Arts at Rutgers. Wendy has exhibited internationally, especially over the last 5 years, Hong Kong, Japan, and throughout Europe. She has solo exhibitions coming up in Dusseldorf in 2012, and following that in the spring, a solo exhibition at Leo Koning. That'll be your fourth, right?
My third.
Third, okay. She just finished a visiting artist gig, if you will, at the School of Visual Arts in New York City. And Wendy's experience is very broad. She's actually lived in the South for 7 years. She served the curator at Davis Werner, no, director of gallery at Davis Werner.
No, I wasn't director.
Okay, right.
No, but I did work.
Yes, thanks. This is a dialogue. You see, you're helping me do your introduction. I so appreciate you. And you know, it's just such a pleasure to have her here tonight. And let's give her a round of applause and bring Wendy in.
I want to thank Ruth and thank everybody for having me. It's just an honor to be here. It's been so much fun so far, and I haven't even seen student work yet, so I feel like it's just a really packed, really fun visit. Thanks you guys for coming out. I have little videos that run alongside my slides, and I use that as a way to show the context, kind of things that I'm looking at. You'll see some of these also in a video piece that's in the gallery, in Gallery 2. Rather than I'm kind of uncomfortable with having just one image to focus on. I always like to have that running context, just to give you a sense, and I don't have to talk about all the people that I'm looking at, all the things that I'm looking at. You can kind of get that as it's going. And I also feel like it's kind of more exciting to have that little ticker running up there. So I hope you enjoy that, just to explain what that is. This is a shot from 2006 from my first solo show in New York. It was at a really small gallery that doesn't exist anymore called 67 in Chelsea. And this painting, Grass Day, is actually in the show here, Cress, so you'll see it. When this show, while I was working on the work for this exhibition, this review came out by Jerry Saltz. You guys all know who Jerry Saltz is? Okay, you probably know him from the Bravo show now, but he was like our kind of preeminent contemporary art critic in New York. He used to work at the Village Voice, and now he's at New York Magazine, and they publish his articles on ArtNet. And he reviewed a show by Charlene von Heil, the German painter. And when the review came out, it was just as I was kind of halfway through making the work for the show. In the first paragraph of this review, he just gave this amazing breakdown of kind of gender-based statistics in New York at the time. He said that only 1 in 5 solo shows in New York at any given time was by a woman. A very small percentage of those were women painters. An even smaller percentage of those were abstract painters. Then he went on to say that, quote, for a woman to be painting in a non-representational, vaguely gestural mode right now is consciously or not a political act. If that woman is over 35, it could be called revolutionary. Some would say it's suicidal. So I think I was just 35 then, but I was all of those things. I was like, okay, here we go. I haven't even had my first show yet. That was a major shocker for me to read that by somebody who had been in New York for a long time and knew what he was talking about. And but it kind of gave me freedom. I felt somehow free, like all the odds were against me, so I had nothing to lose. So I just went for it, and I made the work that I wanted to make, kind of no holds barred, and I never looked back from there. And fast forward to 2010, this is my second solo show at Leo Koning. And when this show opened, 2 reviews immediately came out in the first week the show was open. One really great review from Jerry Saltz. I got a critic's pick for the show. And the second, not so positive, from Charlie Finch. And the title of that review was Why Must Bad Painting Be Good? And I don't know if you guys are familiar with Charlie Finch, but he's pretty brutal to stuff that he doesn't like. And he pretty much said that me and other painters, and he listed some amazing people like Luke Toymans and Marlene Dumas, were, quote, undermining our content with haphazard gestures. He said that paintings like mine and like these other artists appeal to lazy collectors, implying that because the paintings seem to kind of thwart a conventionally skillful approach, that they appeal to undiscerning viewers. He talked about quote-unquote bad painting without reference to the German bad painting movement like Kippenberger and Albert Olin, and without any reference to the 1978 show at the New Museum called Bad Painting. And so even though it had been part of, the term had been part of the dialogue for nearly 30 years, he really saw my work as an affront to skillful painting. And I kind of liked that review. I was really psyched about it, even more than the good review, because A, it was this very visceral assessment of my work, which I was after, and B, he called me a star. He said I was a much celebrated new star, and I was like, oh, wow, great. So I kind of ignored the bad part, I was like, so I don't really align myself with bad painting per se, because I'm not, but at the same time, I'm not trying to make conventional paintings in any way. Like Ruth mentioned, I was a fibers undergrad, so I came to painting in kind of an organic way through materials, through canvas and paint, as materials with connotations rather than as an image maker. I never took painting classes as an undergrad. I think I did take one class, or it's kind of a lie. I took one class, but I hated it. I really hated the idea of oil paint and kind of the preciousness of materials and like picking the perfect white, the perfect size brush. I was just never that person. I just wanted to go for it. This painting is called Real Brick. It's from a series that I call Text Constructions. I started in around 2009. It's about 9 by 10 feet. I've also never ever been into the idea of straight depiction. Instead, I'm always going for a vibe or a kind of a glimpse. When I start a painting, I often have an idea of the palette, an idea of the cadence of the composition, but it's very intuitive. The process is very intuitive and process-driven. In 2009, not to talk about too much Cress, but I feel like it kind of marked certain points for me, career-wise. In 2009, an article came out called Provisional Painting by Raphael Rubenstein. It was in Art America. And he cited me as an artist who is making, quote, works that look casual, dashed off, tentative, unfinished, or self-canceling. He said that I, quote, deliberately turn away from strong painting for something that seems to constantly risk inconsequence or collapse. And he also said that it looks like I run out of paint. The risking collapse part is totally right on. And the running out of paint part is too. I actually use an airbrush almost exclusively now. And a lot of times I let it run out of paint on purpose to kind of get the diffusion effects that I want. We're losing a little bit, there's a lot of white canvas in some of these and the contrast is a little high. So the tentativeness that he mentions, although it does manifest formally, is also fundamentally linked to how my ideas form, how I arrive at a final image, and how language itself is abstracted through reading, writing, and our perception of both. And that's the reason I started to work with text. This painting is called Up with Briquette. It's from 2010. It's about 6 feet tall and 10 feet wide. With these paintings, I really wanted to expand on the idea of foreign language cachet, to kind of see if I could play with the associations of words based on their ability or inability to be recognized and made relevant. So the word briquette in this painting is a French word, obviously, that's super familiar from every backyard barbecue. I'm trying to call attention to words and phrases as visuals first, and then allow the meaning to be gleaned through the abstraction process. But even more importantly, the text is structural in these paintings. Not just the extensions, but in the canvases themselves. The extensions are architecture compared to the text that is painted. So the extensions of text read immediately as signage. I'm really interested in what is in our urban periphery, the things that we don't necessarily absorb completely, kind of the pieces, the fragments, bits of meaning that are accumulated without really being conscious of it, things that we're synthesizing but not necessarily analyzing. This painting is called Dot. It's also 2010. I'm also really into texting, like in theory, the idea of texting and how it's become such a huge part of communication. So this is LMFAO, if you're not seeing things. It's very architectural, it's very primitive, and it's always in flux. The way that we write and the way that we speak is always being amended, deconstructed, and reintroduced. I also really love that people are always seeking ways to personalize texting, like using a 3, it's backwards 3 instead of an E, things like that. I'm hoping that someday everyone has their own custom font, so that wherever you log in, it's going to recognize you. And you know, it's just, I feel like it's annoying that everything, like Facebook comments, are all the same kind of format. And there's a stigma with certain fonts and styles that I think is interesting, that I hope if we could personalize that, we can really get into those idiosyncrasies. Like, for example, if you use Times New Roman for your CV, you're either an academic or you're over 50. Just the way it is. Nobody ever indents anymore. And typos, I love typos. I feel like they make things funnier, more interesting, and they give a sense of individuality. So I really love that in texting with character limits and those mistakes, like you just get the gist of it, even if you don't see the whole thing, you know what somebody's trying to say. And then there's the pure construction of typing itself. You're watching each word be built letter by letter. So what you choose to leave in or take out is as much a visual process as it is a cognitive one. So what I was saying about like comments on the internet, I actually think that things without punctuation are funnier. They're kind of slightly nebulous. Also, jokes and sarcastic comments with the punctuation dropped off. Questions without question marks seem less invasive somehow. That really bugged me at first, but now I get the no question mark bit. This painting is called Briefer. It's from 2010. It's about 8 feet tall. This was in that same second show at Leo Koenig. Incidentally, the letters that extend from my paintings are not cut from a single board. They're all constructed piece by piece with a custom miter to fit the preceding piece. So they're constructed left to right as if you're writing. So it's an intuitive process, like I mentioned before. So while I'm building, I'm making these structural decisions, like, can this be a P or does this need to be an R so that it has that extra leg for stability? So I'm kind of leaving the process open-ended, so it results in one form versus another. I'm really against like executing an idea. I always like there to be some kind of element of chance or element of where it can change through the process for me so that I'm surprised. So there's these, you know, choices that are made that are partly in service to the word and partly in service to the structure. It's sort of like concrete poetry, I guess, where the way things look are as important as what they mean. And I also want there to be an underlying structure that goes beyond just canvas and frame, kind of enters the realm of architecture and facade. Lately, I've been looking at a lot of functionalist architecture, mostly Scandinavian, from the 1930s. This is the Paradise Restaurant. It was part of the Stockholm exhibition in 1930, which was like a big design fair that was intended to introduce Swedes to the functionalist style. And this looks pretty standard to us now. But for the time, that scale and the prominence of that sign was really radical, and the fact that those letters were freestanding. An even more dramatic example is this Alvar Aalto building in Finland, the Turn Sanomat building, which is a newspaper, where newspapers housed. It was also 1930. This building completely blows my mind. The fact that that sign extends past the roof line, yet that design idea is not echoed anywhere else in this almost kind of brutalist structure. So it's almost a flaw. It's like they ordered the wrong sign when they selected it anyway. Here's another view. It's just so strange. And what I love the most is how that sign juts into the plane of the sky. That's the thing that's always bugged me about buildings, is that they have to end somewhere and they have to start somewhere. So what's happening at the ground, what's happening at the sky is so crucial. And that same thing bothers me about paintings. It took me forever to figure that out. I always wanted to paint, but I never liked the rectangle. I never got why you would want to stay in the rectangle. So I'm always looking for ways to break that. You know, paintings just end and then you have to deal with the wall. So, trying to make things that go past the rectangle. This is one of the first pieces. This is called Baptist Grape. It was in my first show at Leo Koenig in 2008. I engineered one canvas to wrap around the corner so that it intersects what would ordinarily be just the space between two paintings. So a painting that fits in a corner is not really a big deal. I mean, we've seen stuff like this before. But I wanted to expand on that by kind of forcing the wall to bleed onto the canvas by leaving a lot of white space and the opposite. So it's kind of a riff on tagging, but with an element of containment and a really heavy do-it-yourself kind of DIY mark-making sensibility. This gives you a sense of the scale. It's about 7 feet tall, about 9.5 feet wide. It was hung pretty low. I wanted to mimic the reveal under the reception desk on the left and also the inset recessed area of the ceiling. There were only 4 paintings in this first show. They were all multiple panel and they ranged from about 9 to 14 feet. For some reason I end up with 4 painting shows all the time. I work with multiple canvases rather than single shaped canvases because I like the fact that the individual panels can be broken down into parts. They're essentially modular, which I feel is more modern than making some gigantic, oppressive single object. And plus there's the potential for the composition to be rearranged, even though technically they're not meant to be. Then the actual visible gaps between the multiple canvases destroy or kind of counteract the preciousness of surface. I didn't want to make, and I still don't want to make salon paintings that are big just to be big, but I think that big paintings are more exciting to be in the presence of. So using multiple canvases is kind of a way to bridge those opposite impulses. These paintings are mainly from 2007, 2008. Formally, I'm dealing very directly with juxtapositions like containment and sprawl, compression and release, and the multiple canvases extend that area into wall space, and trying to bring the wall space back in, like I mentioned before. And you can see here the text beginning to emerge in these. The mark making in these paintings was really in an effort to destroy the hierarchy between art marks and what I like to call task marks. Everything from the marks the gas company makes before they do work, fluorescent paint, a few arrows before they drill in the sidewalk, to graffiti, to somebody's spackling job on a wall. Some things I was thinking about in these paintings, the difference between play and labor, covering versus beautifying, and then what the actions associated with those impulses actually look like. So the marks kind of range from really spontaneous gestures to highly intentional graphics. I'm always trying to uncloud my mind as to what is legitimate. I've tried to not have a hierarchical radar. I try to give all kinds of marks equal ability. To take that notion even further, and this is a painting that's in the show here, I really think that virtuosity is overrated in painting, especially as it relates to skill of depiction. So in a sense, I guess I do have a kinship to bad painting. But I'm always trying to think of ways to circumvent the impulse to make something quote unquote better, just to make a different version of a painting. And I honestly don't believe there's really any more virtuosity to the way you move your wrist to make, with a brush than there is to the way you move your wrist to play tennis. This painting is called Mrs. Dash, 2008. It's in our show. And this really exemplifies that contrast between containment and sprawl, density and levity. The soccer ball is attached to the wall by a metal arm, activating the unpainted space and suggesting a correlation between athletics and artistic process. That correlation has been a big deal for me for several years. I really think there's a very palpable connection between athletic achievement and working in the studio. Not just the energy, but the actual headspace, like what it takes for somebody to want to train for a marathon and what it takes to get the momentum to go into your studio every day. I feel like it's a very similar kind of life pursuit, and a very strange one and difficult to describe to somebody who's not also in it. The ball, this is the ball that's on top of a pole in front of the painting. My intention was for it to function as a vacuum, but also as a focal point, so that the energy of the painting and the marks is sucked into one stable kind of moment. I also like the idea of that juxtaposition of the very store-bought, perfect mass-produced item with the gestural quality of the marks. And I've always gone for that very physical quality with just paint. This is called Post-Wrap. It's from 2006. And by just paint, I make those sculptural pieces where I'm really accentuating that juxtaposition. But I think it's always been there that I wanted to put something, I wanted to really attach something. And I was always trying to achieve that on the flat surface. And it's taken me a long time to actually directly put things onto the canvas. Now I just cut balls in half and glue them right on. But that kind of lens flare black dot was really the beginning of that. But here it isn't just paint. It's from 2006. This is a painting called Zombie Bank, 2009. It's about 14 feet long and made up of 4 canvases. So having an object just be close, I started out as a sculptor, so I always made separate paintings and sculptures, and then gradually they got closer and closer, like physically closer, until I was kind of making these tandem paintings and sculptures that were almost codependent. And it just wasn't invasive enough anymore. I needed to do something more direct. I needed it to be done in one gesture. That's when I started cutting the balls in half and gluing them right on. So there is a ball in that top right quadrant. I also started using raw canvas around this time, or a combination of raw and primed. And I switched from spray paint and brushwork, acrylic brushwork, to airbrush. I use textile inks now, so that they really absorb into the raw canvas. It's a completely different, more atmospheric surface than some of the old ones. Using a brush, just actually touching the surface, had stopped making sense to me. It just did not feel right to do that. It's weird, but in order to become closer to the work, I physically needed to back off. I needed to be hitting the canvas with color from a distance rather than actually applying it. I just wanted my hand out of the equation. I also started calling attention to the seams between the canvases. I'd been experimenting with directional elements and gradations as references to athletic gear, graphics that are specifically meant to indicate speed or endurance. And in this painting, I placed them directly over the seams, almost like taping the canvases together with paint. So it was a way of accentuating a physical break in the canvas by way of this symbol for movement. This painting is called Feel Rabbit or Not. It's 2009. I made this body of work for a show in Madrid in fall 2009. And it was the first time that I installed the paintings to hover just an inch above the floor. I wanted to go for more of a site-specific feel. I still wanted painting, but I somehow almost wanted them to feel like they had slipped down off the wall, or like they'd been hinged at the floor line and propped up. So the low hanging height, that's my husband, right? The low hanging height combined with the scale of these paintings, they were very huge, really forced the object versus painting versus architecture question, and the text became more prominent, and the surfaces themselves much more atmospheric. This painting is called Hip Replacement. A few months later, 2 of those paintings, one traveled to Mallorca for a group show called Third Thoughts. It was a show that Barry Schwabsky curated that was about text-based work related to Allen Ginsberg, first thought, best thought theory. And the painting on the right, I don't know if you recognize it, it's Monique Prieto. So in a group show context, the low hanging really has an even stranger kind of gravitational effect. So now I just look at the space underneath everyone else's paintings. It just drives me nuts. I just want to close that gap. And here, when I look at this install shot, I didn't actually go to Mallorca for the show, but when I look at this, and I just think, why didn't they put mine where hers is and they could have covered the outlet? No brainer.
There's an outlet.
Yeah, exactly. I also make framed paintings that I call contained paintings. Each one has a canvas wrapped frame that kind of extends the painted surface. The interior canvas and the frame are usually painted separately and then put together and painted again. I intentionally make the frames about 1/8 of an inch too big, and then I shim the gaps between the canvas and the frame with strips of painted canvas that are kind of rolled into a piping. I've always been fascinated by the impulse to fill gaps and cracks, like sticking a cigarette butt between the slats on a bench, just that impulse to want to interrupt the surface. This painting is called Pad. It's from 2010. These are about 4 by 5 feet, and they're hung at standard height. So for me, that simple move of filling those gaps and interrupting the picture plane really opens up an object-based space. You can always see in all of my work how things are put together, even if you can't determine the order of the steps. And that's important to me. Also, using the same material to shim those gaps really forces you to think about canvas as a material for building rather than just a substrate for painting. Even stretched or gessoed canvas is never a blank slate. It's woven, and it has connotations that run the gamut from high-end nautical to cheap drop cloth. This painting is in the show. It's called You Are. It's from 2010. This is incidentally the painting that Charlie Finch called out in his review. The idea for cutouts of text that you saw in the more recent large paintings emerged from making these smaller ones. The text first appeared along the top edges, like in this one. This is Rank, also in the show. I was thinking about billboards, but also Victorian mirrors, where the frames are extremely ornate. And the disproportionate scale of frame to mirror also relates to the functionalist architecture that I've been looking at. Basically, I wanted to see how much I could extend out from the edge of a painting before it left the realm of painting and frame and became sculpture or signboard. I also briefly I'm rolling through all the ones that are in the show now. I also briefly experimented with separate freestanding letters, canvases, like you can see most notably in the smaller canvas on the bottom left. And that process to me was really critical. I wanted the relationship of the pieces to be spelled out somehow in the paint on the surface. Last fall, I had a show in Chicago called French Cuts. The paintings were based mainly on untranslatable French phrases. This painting is called Fond de Raquette, which is French for turnaround area, but loosely translates to bottom of the tennis racket in English. That's not the text that you see, obviously. It started with the Spanish word especial, but that's another story. But this very earnest writer in Chicago wrote a really nice long review of this show. And he went into detail about how he had his French dictionary out and was really trying to find out exactly what the words were and how they've been abstracted. And it was really a futile effort because they've been abstracted through the cognitive process, again through the process of building these, again through the painting process, and that direct correlation wasn't there. I could have saved him a long time if he'd called me. But it was interesting, and it actually got me thinking about whether I wanted to involve myself in, whether I wanted to have the viewer read my paintings. And text for me just had always seemed necessary, but reading never was. I feel like pieces of text and the abstractions of text are really the way to describe how cobbled together the urban experience is, kind of how we intuitively register symbols. It kind of goes beyond just recognition, momentary recognition. It enters the realm of kind of a subconscious synthesis. The best analogy that I can think of is when you're speeding down the highway and you see pieces of a billboard, and you just know from a certain font or a certain graphic that it's an ad for a bank, or it's a billboard for used cars, or something you just kind of know because of the style, and just those pieces can give you so much. So I like that very little but very crucial information. This is the title track from the French Cuts show. I call it that because French Cuts is also the title of a French pop music compilation album that came out in about 2004. And then there are also all the things that are French cut, everything from taillights on classic cars, to string beans, to underwear, to AV swimsuits, everything that is aerodynamic and basically streamlined. And that's reflected in a lot of those directional elements that I use in the paintings. And I was also trying to hone in on a certain font in these. It's kind of a chiseled out version of what I had been doing with much more precise edges and with the exterior angles locked off. This painting is called A Lavario. Rather than concealing the use of tape, I really try to draw attention to its immediacy, its user-friendliness, through the use of standard widths and the occasional kind of torn edge. I use the tape as a stencil to build up gradual layers of very lightly applied, very atmospheric paint application, while maintaining this very concise graphic edge. I also have an ongoing series of small paintings that I use as a way to work out spatial relationships between the taped areas and the atmospheric areas. They range in size from 9 by 12 to about 18 by 24 inches. They're not studies for the big paintings, and I showed these paintings once, and I don't think I'll ever show small paintings again. I could talk more about that later, but they do have a substantial effect on the way that I work out the large paintings, especially the surface. For about a year now, I have been working on a series I call 3 Stripes. They have a wooden frame that sets off these huge atmospheric spaces. The striping is loosely based on the Adidas stripe. The speed of the stripes counters the blurry layers of the paintings, kind of speeding up the fast marks and slowing down the slow marks. And there's a very strong horizontal motion in these new canvases. And again, it's that idea of zipping past billboards I'm really trying to capture. Or perhaps like the reflection of a painting in a mirror that has maybe been cleaned with the wrong product. I'm always looking for that kind of way to get that grime somehow into it. This is called Orange Now Baxter. It's from 2011. It's about 7 by 8 feet. Baxter Street in downtown Manhattan used to be called Orange Street back in the Gangs of New York days. And I live in Chinatown, so I've really gotten immersed in the history of my neighborhood. The text on top is 5 PTS, short for 5 points. This painting is one of the earliest 3 Stripes. I apologize for the kind of crappy slide. It's called LES, named for the Lower East Side. I live directly in between the Brooklyn and Manhattan bridges. So I walk under a bridge to go anywhere from where I live. There's tons of graffiti, there's tons of grime, and Chinatown is like the least changed neighborhood. Nothing is really replaced. When a new business goes up, usually the signage is just covered. There are a lot of layers and pieces, like an awning will just get another chunk of signage attached to it instead of a new awning. So I've really become obsessed with the history of my neighborhood. The constant destruction, building up, covering up. It's had an effect on not just the way that I see the city, but the way that my paintings are built. This is a shot of Doyer Street. In the late 1800s, Doyers is this one block long street in Chinatown. It's this funny little right angle street. And at the height of the gang wars, like in the mid-teens and 20s, they called it the Bloody Angle because so many people were killed by hatchet during the gang wars. They would chase them into this corner where they'd be trapped. And it's pretty gruesome. But there's a network of tunnels underneath the street that is somewhat accessible still. This is the current shot of Doyers now, today at street level. That Goldflower restaurant sign on the right is now this really hipster, kind of, I don't know, prohibition-style bar with like $16 cocktails. But this is the only bit of identification in the whole neighborhood. So it's funny. And the gate is always halfway down. It's like, you're like, ooh, I found a bar. It's supposed to be like this real hipster excursion. But what fascinates me about Doyers and about New York City in general is just how much life is lived on the street. Everything changes, but there's zero nostalgia, and your feet are always, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I'm just kind of fascinated by the fact that your feet are always on the same streets, walking the same streets, and there's like this persistent center of gravity. This painting is called Moscow. It's named for one of the original streets that intersected at 5 points. The text in the main part of the painting is part of a Dickens quote. Dickens wrote about that area, about 5 points, and the kind of squalor of the area in 1842 in the book American Notes. I'm not sure if you read it. I really wanted to capture a haziness in that painting to kind of somehow get to the decades-long kind of accumulation of signage, all the roads and paths that have been replaced, a pond which is no longer there, and the city park that now lies on the site of that original intersection. The title of this painting is Mulberry Bend. There's a crook in Lower Mulberry Street at 5 points, and it was the epicenter of the 5 Point slum, that era. And the crappiest, most terribly managed Dunkin' Donuts that you will ever set foot in is right at the crook of Mulberry Bend. And I feel like every business, this is just the current business, but everything that is there is kind of doomed to fail. It's sort of like the history is just in the street. And This is 65 Mott, which was the site of the first tenement in New York City. It's on Mott Street, just above Bayard Street. It's one unprimed canvas with a smaller primed section on the right. The painting looks optically like it's divided into 4 sections, but it's really just 2 canvases. And this one has a more infrastructural reference in the striping, almost like plumbing or a drainage system. And I've also been working on a series, very recent, of smaller 3 stripes. They're about 3 by 4 feet. This is called Sunset Park. So I kind of work smaller to always remind myself of the scale of the striping to the paintings and to make adjustments if necessary. And this installation in a slightly different format is in the show here. I've also explored the 3 stripe as more of an invasive architectural detail. Here I wanted it to function as part street curb, part interior baseboard, part signboard. It's called 5-7 Doyers. It's based on the right angle of Doyer Street. The canvas on the left references the tunnel entrance, and the one on the right references the Namwa Dim Sum Parlor, which has been there since 1920 and is completely intact. So the geography of this actual corner, which I walk through almost every day, not because I have to, but because I'm obsessed with it, is both a departure point and also kind of a conceptual and physical anchor for the paintings, a way to locate the scale, the palette, and the orientation of the canvases, while still allowing the painting and the construction of the elements to be process-driven and open-ended. I want a level of specificity, but I need that openness. That's very crucial to me, that they stay open in order to keep the momentum going to the next painting. There's something that Lisa Yuskavage said in an interview, the painter Lisa Yuskavage, that has always resonated with me, and I wanted to read that to you just as a closing quote. She said that, quote, painters have to create space for themselves. They have to transform what others might see as an unoccupiable, 2-dimensional, razor-thin line. That tiny line potentially opens up and transforms itself into a gigantic cavern of space in which there is endless potential. Thanks so much.
We have a reception in the lobby, but before we adjourn, are there any questions in the audience?
You knew this was coming, didn't you?
Yeah.
She knows these 2 questions because we talked at lunch, but the first one is choose any work of art from any artist to grace the show that's down there. So she could choose from any artist of any time, any particular work of art, what would it be? And then the second question I asked her was just to throw out 2 or 3 names of people that she's real excited about that we might not know about that we should look at.
Well, the first question came to mind, my answer came to mind immediately when you asked me that, and it's Andy Warhol's Shadow series. And I'll leave it at that. I won't explain. And I'm, God, there's so many people. Kelty Ferris is a really great painter you guys should know about. She's actually the painter in residence in UTC in Knoxville right now. So maybe there's a way of getting over there and hearing her speak, or maybe she's doing a presentation that you guys can check out. The German painter Katarina Grossa is really interesting. Gosh, I am a sucker for anything Jim Lambie does. I'm so stoked for his upcoming show at Phantom Currents next month. Isa Genskin can do no wrong for me. She's not a super young artist, but she is amazing. One of my favorites. So, yeah. Sure. That's pretty good too, 3 women in one. That just happened naturally.
Wendy, at what point do you decide that you want to and then decide that you shouldn't just apply the paintings to the actual wall of the studio / gallery / whatever?
Good question. For some reason, it doesn't interest me. Yeah, I don't, I always get that question, and there's something about the object of the stretched canvas that I'm just into. And I've never had, I've done sprawl in every possible way, but I feel like it's almost too simple, too reconciled somehow to go right onto the wall. I don't know, I need the obstruction somehow to make it interesting. I shouldn't say canvas is an obstruction, but
It's more sculptural.
yeah, it's something, it's almost like, if you totally break the rules, how it's not really that interesting, but if you kind of tweak the rules, then, I don't know, that's kind of my operating area. Yeah.
Do you build all your canvases?
I do. I feel like I'm like the last, the last person who does, and none of my friends do. It's crazy. I build all of my canvases. I have a herniated disc to prove it. I've been doing it for 15 years. But don't feel bad. I'm fine. But I build them all because I need big canvases first of all, and I'm impatient, and I build things to spec. I'll sometimes start with a multiple canvas paintings with a big canvas, and then I just know, okay, I want one that's 24 inches by 72 inches, and I just have to go build it. I can't, get on the horn and order one and wait. I just have to do it then. So, it's kind of crazy at this point, but I still do
Can
that.
you talk a little bit about the process of how you choose the words that you use? I noticed that most of the titles that have words in the paintings, the word of the title appears in the painting.
That's pretty recent, actually. I started doing it.
Can you just talk about, I guess, like, how do you have like a list of words that you like, or does it come as you're making the painting, or do you come up with a word and then come up with the composition and colors, or?
All of the above. It depends. Like this most recent series is probably the most direct and specific that I've worked with a reference and then made a painting, based on a particular phrase, or in this case, an address. And I talked about it being kind of a way to locate the painting. I think abstract painting is stopped making sense to me in a lot of ways, like straight non-representational painting. And text has been my anchor for there being a departure point. And the text kind of came naturally out of the brushwork that I was doing early on. But yeah, sometimes I know I'm going to make, it's never like I'm going to make a painting of this word.
Right.
It usually just comes in at some point, and I know, I just try to trust my impulse and not ever analyze either what I'm inspired by or how it plays out. I just completely let everything be valid. That's not to say that I'm not making decisions as I go. Obviously, it'd be ridiculous to say I'm not. But yeah, sometimes it's a complete stream of consciousness in the moment, and other times it's, I know I want to make a painting about this place.
At what point did you shy away from like the craft of fibers and move into like a more sculptural and painting, like the finer rubs?
Never, because I never really used traditional fibers.
Yeah.
I was a fibers major because I wanted to make sculpture, and we didn't have a sculpture department. That's how, and also because I got really seduced with the first, there was a class that you had to take. It was either, you had to take Intro to Applied Arts, I think it was called, or some other class as a freshman in undergrad. And I took this class and I was just blown away by talking about, it was so conceptual. It wasn't about technique, it was about what materials meant. And I was like a sponge for that. I just loved it. And I did a lot of screen printing. I always used canvas. I was making like big soft sculptures that were screen printed. So I think the transition for me was going from 3 dimensions to 2 dimensions.
Is that unprimed canvas and using the airbrushing technology like reminiscent of when you did dye work?
I think it is, yeah. I'm kind of a big believer in however you were introduced to art is usually how you find the most pleasure in it. And so what I did shy away from was using tape, using text, all of those things. I had to remove my stigma about, text painters and tapers. And I was like, I'm just gonna do this. It feels right, and I'm just gonna do it. Yeah, I was like, I don't want to be a taper, and I don't want to be somebody who forces people to read my paintings because I think it's obnoxious when I have to read a painting. And yeah, so I knew what I didn't want, and then I gradually had to accept that those things were either I was going to do them and be real about it, or I was going to forever be kind of fighting my impulses. Yeah.
Got another quick question. You talk a lot about how you began in like sculpture and textiles. I was wondering, since your canvases are so large, if you work with them in the round, if you like kind of move them around, and if you approach them as a sculpture, more as a sculpture than a painting, because you're engaging a space and you're kind of building these wooden structures to go around them and like on top of them.
Not really. I never turn paintings around. And I think I kind of think of the painting and the other elements sort of separately. And then I think a lot about the way they're going to come together. But the painting happens, I'm a very active painter. They're, big canvases on the wall. I'm moving, obviously, a lot to make these marks. But, I don't know, does that answer your question? I think I still very much think of them as paintings until the sculptural elements become involved.